Welcome, Tulane families. My name is Penny White. I'm the Director of Family Programs at Tulane, and I'm very glad that you've joined us for this very important webinar on the topic of accessibility at Tulane, the Goldman Center for Student Accessibility. So I am really pleased to introduce you to my colleague, Jessica Machado, who is the director, and I will turn things over to her and she will describe to you the services and programs that are and the consultation, all the support that's offered through our Goldman Center, and talk to you tonight about the differences between um, what you may have experienced for your student at the K through 12 level and how the university level has some differences and how you go about um, supporting your student in accessing services. So I will turn things over to Jessica now, and I will rejoin you at the end for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Penny. It's my pleasure to be here this evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you. Again, my name is Jessica Machado. I serve as the director of the Goldman Center for Student Accessibility here at Tulane, and I will share that I might be glowing a little bit. It's warm here in New Orleans. If you're not familiar with the summer heat of New Orleans and southern Louisiana, and the air is not working properly here in the building that I'm in. I am currently sitting in the basement of the Howard Tilton Memorial Library, and we don't have as many students here on campus right now, so it's a little warm. If you see me fidgeting a little bit, it's probably just me adjusting to that heat, but it is really nice to be here tonight and speak with all of you. I hope I'm able to address all of your questions and concerns, but we also have our contact information that will be shared with you at the end of our presentation today. And just want to encourage you to reach out and your student really to make a connection with our office to ask any questions they might have and start as early as possible with any questions and working through our registration process, which we'll describe here tonight. Before I get to that though, I did want to share a little bit about my background. I am a school psychologist by training. I worked in the K through 12 school system for a number of years in Virginia, DC, and California before coming back to the East Coast and starting my career in higher education. I have gone through several certification programs that provided training for ADA coordinator responsibilities, and so I am certified as completing ADA coordinator trainings from multiple different organizations, but I have worked in higher education and disability support services offices at small public institutions of higher education, large public and private higher education institutions. I just came to New Orleans about a year ago now. From the DC area, and it's really been an exciting adventure. I have a year under my belt here at Tulane, but have served in disability support services offices for over 13 years, and it's really been a dream of mine to work with students in higher education with disabilities and promote accessibility at the different higher education institutions in my different roles. And so I wanted to share that background because I feel like that is something that might be helpful in terms of understanding that I have in-depth understanding about the different types of services and supports that may have been available to your students in the K through 12 setting and the challenges that they might have or experience. Maybe not so much challenges, but transitioning to higher education is a big adjustment, and there's a lot of things that change, including these types of accommodation supports and what that plan might look like. So I did want to talk a little bit about how our office works. At the Goldman Center, our mission is to provide a lot of awareness across our campus to work towards eliminating barriers for students with disabilities. And Penny, I realized I didn't pause to let you know that I was going to move on, but thank you so much. We in our office are responsible for ensuring that all students with disabilities have access to every program that we we have here on our campus at Tulane. And we hope that students that connect with our office find that we are strong advocates for them and for people with disabilities across the board, that we advocate strongly for inclusion, but more than that, to create a campus environment that's truly welcoming, where every student with or without disabilities feels valued. And to ensure access for every member of our community is a part of the work that we do every day. The majority of our work revolves around providing accommodations, and so those are individualized supports for each student that connects with our office. But we also recognize that accessibility can be so much more than providing accommodations for one student with unique needs. And so we really work towards different opportunities, providing awareness, training, guidance, consultation to every member of our community, whether that's a faculty member, a staff member, and supporting our students, so that we are really building that community that values disability as a component of diversity, and acknowledging that that piece of diversity, those differences that make all of our students so unique, are what makes our campus great. How we work towards achieving that mission, and this is our next slide, we in our office are primarily working towards meeting with individual students and making individual accommodation decisions. Coming up with those accommodation plans for individual students does take up the majority of our time, and we also work with students as they may encounter other challenges or experiences where disability advising might be really important. Let's say they are wanting to prepare for their study abroad experience and thinking about the unique accommodations or considerations outside of accommodations, when it comes to managing their needs in a different country, or when they're preparing to graduate and thinking about how they might be interviewing or preparing for a job after campus. That might be something that we are also a great resource for students, in addition to the other resources on our campus, to be able to provide some of that informal advising support. But we do work with many students related to all accommodation needs, whether that's academic, things that might impact them in the classroom, in testing situations, or even to support with dining and housing needs, or any other programmatic type of need that might require an adjustment or a modification to the way that we do things here typically, to be able to support a student and ensure that they have access. Our office also provides assistive technology support in the form of access to certain types of software or training, or just guidance on apps and programs that we may be able to provide direct support for a student who might qualify for an accommodation. Our office may have certain licenses or access to software that we might be able to provide to a student at no cost or low cost. Or be able to provide guidance for a student who relies or uses assistive technology on a regular basis, to be able to ensure that their assistive technology is able to be implemented appropriately and effectively in the different experiences that they might have. And so that is a part of the support that we provide through our office. We have a testing center that also provides support for a large number of students who are eligible and receive testing support, such as extended time accommodations. And we work very closely with faculty that all of our students engage with on a regular basis, as well as administrators and staff around campus, to work towards how we might be able to identify any policies or practices that may not be the most inclusive or accessible for students with disabilities, and work towards how we might be able to create a more inclusive Tulane overall. The part that I've mentioned previously about students and making strong connections with our office is so important. If there's anything that you take away from tonight, It's to encourage your students to get connected with our office if they do feel like they could benefit or require the supports of our office, to connect with us as early as possible. Our process can take some time. We are not a crisis response office, so being able to make an immediate decision on the spot if a student were to walk in and want to have an accommodation that same day in place is not something that we're able to do. And that's because we really want to make sure that we're making fair and equitable decisions and reviewing all of the information, having a chance to talk with a student, reviewing all of the documentation that they provide is really important. And we work with thousands of students here at Tulane. And so it is important to understand that working with our office is something that can take some time, and we really do want to encourage students to connect with us as early as possible so that they can start building a support network and have an ease of connection so that we're already here. There's not a process that they have to go through if they do need something later, that they're already well connected to somebody in our office that can help. And by making a strong connection with our office, we can also be available to meet with them outside of initial accommodation requests or decisions and just provide that informal guidance or advising. And this is where some really good work can take place too. If a student can really access our support and feel comfortable with using us as a resource to be just able to talk to somebody about things that they might not feel comfortable with talking to other people about. We treat all of a student's information as confidential related to their disability, and so we would be able to provide information to that student that would be something that would be protected and safe, and we hope that we create a safe environment where they do feel like they can share information that may be personal or helpful for us to know so that we can provide the best guidance and advising related to their specific needs as possible. But our goal is to really help students become strong advocates for themselves and to help them with feeling empowered to be able to go out and articulate and advocate for their needs in appropriate and respectful ways so that they can make great relationships here at Tulane and beyond and know their rights and know how to navigate the world with a disability. So that's why we feel like it's so important to make those strong connections and to start early. Next slide, please. We serve students with disabilities, quite simply, but that could look like a student who has previously received support through a 504 plan or an IEP, an individualized education plan, a student who may have been attending private school and has a different type of support plan, maybe a newly identified student, someone who has never had a diagnosis before, and this information might be very new and they're adjusting to a lot of new things about their identity and how they might be able to manage their needs and have never experienced this type of need to work through a process or having accommodations or having to coordinate these types of supports in this way. And we work with students on an ongoing basis as well. So really encouraging students to stay well connected. That first meeting that we have with a student where they're initially connecting with our office and making requests for accommodations is really just one piece of how we can support students. And as students are going through their experiences here at Tulane, they may find that other needs arise that they didn't know to talk about because they'd never experienced college before. And so we do want to make sure that students feel comfortable with reconnecting with us. It's not just about making an accommodation request. If they're experiencing any challenge or barrier and they don't know who else to go to, or maybe they don't know the specific accommodation to make a request for, they can always come back, connect with that staff person in our office that is that they've already connected with, that has the familiarity with their needs, and just talk about what might be impacting them or even good things that they may want to share, since hopefully that relationship is in place, and may be able to provide that ongoing support for a student who might have any other need that comes up outside of an initial request for an accommodation as well. Next slide, please. I did want to take a little bit of time to talk through some of the differences between K through 12 and higher education. And a lot of that looks like the legal framework that we use to base decisions off of when it comes to 504 plans or special education services or other types of accommodation support in K through 12 versus the accommodations that a student may be eligible for in higher education. Sometimes we experience students or families that have questions about whether or not their IEP or 504 will transfer over to higher education. It's not quite as simple as a transfer over. It does require reviewing of all documentation, and sometimes 504 plans or IEPs may not share all of the information that would be helpful for us in our decision making. What we're looking for is information that points to ways that we can help with understanding a student's current level of functioning. And so the ADA is the piece of legislation that we base a lot of decisions off of, and the ADA defines a disability as significant life impairment in one or more of the major life activities. And so that can be a subjective definition there, but we are looking at how we might be able to use that criteria of what might qualify as a person with a disability. And we are not looking extensively at, like, can you prove that you have a disability? But it is important for us to understand the limitations or the significant life impairment when we're making decisions in that way. So just how a student is impacted, and how it might relate to this environment here at Tulane, either in their classroom setting or housing or anything else that they might experience here at Tulane while they're living and learning. And that piece of legislation is what we use to also make decisions based off of access. And so the law requires that all students with disabilities have an opportunity to be able to participate in everything that we do here at Tulane. But that does differ from the legislation in K through 12 that points towards success. And so when we're thinking about in K through 12 what those accommodations or that plan may look like, we are oftentimes looking at what is going to be most beneficial, most helpful, or be what is going to help that student reach their full potential, help them be successful, and ensure that there's no child left behind, right? That there is the ability for that student to be able to be successful and achieve and get through everything. And the difference in higher education is ensuring that that student is able to participate. And so that might not be the same as what might be the best thing for a student, but what we want to do is make sure that that student is well resourced and has all of the information that we could possibly give them so that they are making the best decisions for themselves. And working closely with our office and having that good relationship is how we can best support, even outside of the formal accommodations that we're able to approve. But all of our accommodation decisions are based off of that need for access in higher education. And so we're looking at that criteria established by the ADA. Does the person have a disability when they're connecting with our office? And what is that major life impact? What does that functioning level look like, so that we can make those determinations based off of that information. It's okay if you don't know everything to ask for right off the bat. We use the information that you provide or that your student provides to us to make the best decisions we can, but it's in no way a one and done conversation. We understand that students might experience things that are very different than they've ever experienced before. Truly, that's what college is all about. And so we want to make sure that students know that they can always circle back to us and we can always provide additional support. I'll talk more about our registration process in a moment, but we do ask for students to provide supporting documentation to help us with understanding that current functional limitation or the impacts of their disability, and use all of the information that's shared with us to make the best decisions we can. And so it's really important to encourage your students to share as much information as they can that they think would be helpful for us to help us with best understanding the full scope of their needs. Sometimes we do have students that may share one piece of information and then later share something else and something else, but it does end up being something that's been a long-standing condition, and that maybe that they've received accommodations for a long time before they actually share that information with us. And so we just want to encourage sharing as much as your student is comfortable with, because it helps us with avoiding a lot of assumptions or guesswork and having to go back and forth with asking for more documentation if there's not something that is there that helps us with understanding or making a connection to those disability related needs that we really do need to be able to inform our decisions. So wanted to just share that to be, you know, to be most helpful and most efficient in working through our process. Giving us information as much as you have as possible up front is encouraged, but don't feel overwhelmed by what I'm sharing about documentation. If what you have is an IEP or 504 plan, that student is welcome to submit that information and that information alone. We'll do the best we can with anything that you have, and really just getting the ball rolling with starting with our office is the best advice that I can give you. So anything that you have we'll work with, and we'll do the best that we can with that information. We are an office that prides itself on really being open to parental involvement. It's really whoever the student would like to be involved with conversations. We welcome that. In higher education, there are protections around sharing student-related information that we do also have to keep in mind. But students often bring parents to their meetings with them. We always communicate directly with the student. And so if there is information that the student would like to make sure that you're included on, we would encourage the student to share that with you. We'd encourage the student to invite you to any meetings and let us know that you're coming. But we would certainly welcome your involvement, and would also just want to share with you that we really require students to be actively engaged in order for the accommodation process to work effectively. There's a lot of coordination that's going to be shifted from the school to the student at this stage in higher education. And so the student really does need to have a lot of awareness and understanding about what their responsibilities are to allow for an effective accommodation plan to work. And their communication with our office is essential, but they are the ones that are going to be going out and really kind of the managers of their accommodations. So they're going out and working and experiencing all of these things. They're managing their life at this point, working with their faculty members. We don't get access to student grades until after they're already posted at the end of the semester. We don't get daily reports from professors. We're not following your students to their classes every day. So our involvement looks really different than it has before in K through 12, when perhaps your student was assigned a case manager or a special education teacher or some specialist that kind of managed their work and reported regularly on progress. That's something that's going to look very different here, and we really do rely on students to let us know if their accommodations aren't working effectively, which is why it's so important for them to start building a great relationship with our office early, and we really encourage that. Next slide, please. So our process with the Goldman Center is to review our documentation guidelines and provide that documentation, whatever you have. The most recent that provides a comprehensive picture of your students' functioning or impacts connected to disability is what we would ask for. That could look different based off of whether or not that's a medical condition or a psychological mental health related disability, a vision loss, hearing loss, sensory related disability, learning disability, autism, ADHD, all of the ways that students may be diagnosed by a specialist or licensed provider who's qualified to give that diagnosis, and maybe the one that's most familiar with that student's disability or reasons for why that student was diagnosed or has multiple diagnoses, is someone that's going to be very helpful for us to get information from to be able to support accommodations. And so whether that's the most recent IEP, the most recent psychological evaluation, information on our Goldman Center provider packet that could be completed by a medical practitioner, such as a medical doctor, but anybody who may be the most familiar and has the most in-depth understanding about that student's condition is going to be the best person to be able to connect with to provide information. That Goldman Center provider packet is not required as part of our documentation, but we do have guidelines for documentation. Again, we try to be very flexible and use anything that you can share with us, that your student can share with us to get the ball rolling. We may have questions and we may ask if there is any additional documentation that your student's able to provide to us to support decisions or certain requests for accommodations if there's not a clear connection already. So that's something that your student may be approached with by our office, a question or a request for additional information if there is some available. And if the student has any questions about documentation, they are also encouraged to connect directly with our office too. What would prompt a connection to our office with a specific kind of specialist in our office? We call them disability resource professionals, or DRPs, in our office. Basically the staff members in our office that work directly with students with disabilities that would be assigned to a student to review all of their documentation and just kind of start that connection with the student and work with them throughout their time here at Tulane. That would be triggered by the student completing an online application. The online application is pretty straightforward. It's not extensive, has some information that we'd like for the student to complete to provide us with a little bit of background and what they're requesting and any other information that could be helpful for us. If they don't know how to answer a question, that's okay. Give it your best shot. There's no right or wrong answer, really, but the more information that the student can share, the better prepared the DRP will be to help the student with informing their next steps. If there's any concern or specific questions that the student might have about our office, they can ask it on the application as well. There's an opportunity to add any thoughts and in text boxes where the student can fill in that information. There's also an opportunity for the student to upload documentation directly to that application. So we do ask for students to maintain copies of their own disability records. That's something that as an adult is really important as a person with a disability, to make sure that you have access to all of your important disability related information that you might need, because that information could be helpful not only here at Tulane but after Tulane in requesting accommodations for outside organizations, like when a student might be going to law school or med school and applying for accommodations from those organizations. It's also going to be important for them to provide additional documentation for those organizations as well. So keeping good records is going to be important for that student to learn how to manage as well. If the doctor or provider is providing information directly to our office, that could also impact the student's ability to have access to maintain their own disability records and know what's in their file and how information might be used to be able to support decisions or what information we even have. I would encourage you to support your students with working with any providers to get information directly and make copies and provide that information to our office in that way. Again, attaching that documentation directly to the online application, and then the student really would just need to check their Tulane email. At that point, our office will reach out pretty quickly. The assigned disability resource professional will be the direct point of contact, so no, kind of bouncing back and forth with, a front desk, somebody who maybe hasn't had a chance to even look at the documentation. The student will then kind of immediately be connected with somebody who they will be assigned to work with for the rest of the time that they're here at Tulane, so long as that staff member, is also here at Tulane, and then that student would be able to ask any questions they might have. That email with next steps for that student could be, hey, do you have any additional documentation? And oftentimes it's, hey, we reviewed your documentation and we'd like to ask for you to set up a meeting with us, schedule a meeting. Here's my link on how you can schedule a meeting at a time that works well for you. We're available virtually or in person for all meetings. Most meetings over the summer are virtual, and so we are happy to meet in any way that works best for the student. And after that, the student would schedule that access interview. That's that initial meeting that we would have with a student where we're connecting and sharing information about how our office works, important things for the student to consider that's specific to that student's information that was shared with us, and addressing their specific accommodation requests, coming up with a plan, making decisions about accommodations, or discussing next steps at that time. And then we also want to make sure that the student understands what their responsibilities are about how their accommodations work. Accommodations do work differently if they're academic or testing or housing. So there are lots of different pieces and information that needs to be shared with that student. So it may take a couple conversations as well, and just for that student to understand that we are trying to do our best to help prepare them for those next steps. If a student does have any housing related accommodation requests, it is important for us to get that request information as early as possible. It's really important for all of these requests to be made as early as possible. That's the best way that we can work with students, is to be very proactive. But with housing, it does involve an additional step of working with a committee. And that committee includes members outside of our office as well. I mentioned that we're very careful and protective of disability related information. We store that disability documentation within a separate database. It's not part of a student's regular record. Their faculty don't have access to this information. That's also a big shift from K through 12 to higher education, where professors don't need to know specifics about a specific disability or diagnosis, and that's really the decision of the student whether or not they want to disclose that specific information. What the professors would be expecting from a student who's registered with our office is for them to connect with them and share their accommodations, and make sure that there is an understanding of how those accommodations are going to work in every class. And in housing, that external group of folks don't also have access to all of the disability related records, but they will have information specific to the housing request that was made, and anything that they might need to know to be able to coordinate or move forward with next steps on their end if there is an approval for a housing accommodation. So of course, folks might need to know people in facilities, people in housing and residence life. We have other members of the campus university, our campus partners that may sit on our committee if we have a specific type of request where additional guidance or consultation might be needed. Our dining folks are also represented on the committee, so we have some good representation where we are working closely with campus partners, but it's important to just build in some extra time if you do have housing accommodation requests at certain times in the year. For our incoming freshmen, for example, those housing decisions about assignments haven't yet been made, and so housing and residence life will soon be making decisions about where your student will be assigned to live. And it's especially important for students to work through our process well before those assignments are made in housing, because after those assignments are made, it can become much more difficult to find available options that might meet a student's needs. If assignments are already made and students are already placed or living in that specific kind of residence life assignment that doesn't meet their needs, then a student who has an approved accommodation through Goldman would be prioritized for placement as immediately as possible, but we don't know exactly when that change might happen. So it's a lot easier to know that information before those assignments are made, so we can just directly put that student into an assignment that meets their disability related needs in housing. I hope that's helpful, but we do want to make sure that your students have a really in-depth understanding about their approved accommodations, how they work, next steps, and so really important for them to know to connect with their DRP anytime there are questions, whether it's initially or anytime after they've initially connected with our office for any of their disability related needs, or truly if they just don't know who else to go to at Tulane. We are here to also help. Our students are really important to us, and we want to make sure that they are connecting with the right resources, whether that's within our office or outside of our office. And there's some really great resources that are here at Tulane that we would also be able to help the student with getting connected with as well. Next slide, please. So I think I've emphasized this point throughout our conversation tonight, but really, really encourage your students to connect with Goldman early. We also can't guarantee exactly when a decision would be made. And so sometimes students may be stressed about when am I going to get this decision back by. It may be dependent on the busyness of our office. As we get closer and closer to the start of the semester, we'll get more and more and more students that are connecting with us. Now, things are very, very slow. So we would encourage you to encourage your students to get connected with us if there's any disability related needs, to start our process and work through it and get things in place now. They won't have a long wait time to set up a meeting with a DRP and get those decisions finalized about their accommodations and work through these next steps. But decisions can also be impacted based off of the documentation that we receive, and there may be some clarification or additional information that we're able to provide to a student about what documentation is needed to support this accommodation request. There may be a need for our office to reach out to a provider for clarification, and that can take some time. So that might impact the timing of when a decision might be made, as well as there's not a guarantee about an approval if a student is connecting with our office. So we would encourage a student to get connected with us so that we can make sure that there is clarity about exactly what their accommodations are going to be, so that they can plan appropriately. Whatever the outcome is of our decisions, whether it's all of your accommodation requests are approved, or we can approve some of them and others may look a little bit differently at Tulane in higher education, and let's talk about that. So wanted to make sure that there was full transparency about the importance of connecting with us, but that there is no guaranteed timeline for when a student may be able to expect a firm decision. It really is going to be dependent on documentation, the type of accommodation request, just the timing in the year and availability of our staff, and the accommodations that we might be able to support that might be reasonable and necessary as well. Next slide, please. We do want to also share that it's very important for the student to be engaged, because really we require an interactive process as part of our decision making, and the student's input is so important as a part of our decision making. How the student has experienced disability, what that experience has looked like for them, just kind of moving through school or life. We want to make sure that we have time to engage with campus partners if there's additional information that might be able to be shared about what resources are available, or perhaps what a student has accessed already for support on campus, and the progress that they've made, or maybe a lack of progress that we really want to be paying attention to. So we do connect with our campus partners often for additional information and insight. And help make those connections with students as well. We may need to talk with faculty. Sometimes that comes up as a part of the decision-making process. So if a student is making a request for maybe a less frequently type of requested accommodation, something that's not very common, and maybe something that a faculty member is not used to providing. It's just not something that, maybe it's never been done before, because truly a student with a disability might be impacted in any number of ways, and a student might request any type of an accommodation. This is why we don't have a prescriptive list, like a menu of items to choose from. We really are basing these decisions off of what's shared with us and how a student might be impacted to determine what might be reasonable and necessary for a student to be able to have access here. And that information comes from a lot of different in a lot of different ways, from a lot of different people. The student sharing their own experiences is a really big part of that, and figuring out what the best is that we can do to support a student is also a really big part of that as well. So we do want to make sure that we're taking all of that information into account when we're making decisions. With faculty, it may be that there is a particular accommodation that's requested that is something that's very unusual, and they're just not sure if they're going to be able to still meet the learning outcomes in the class. Maybe the class is and I'm being very specific here, and I probably shouldn't be, but um, you know, maybe the class is really built on public speaking component. It's a communications class, an oral communications class, and there's a lot of presentations and involvement with group members, and that's an essential learning outcome for that class. And perhaps there might not be the ability for that student to not meet to be able to meet learning outcomes if they don't engage in those public speaking assignments and are evaluated on the different criteria that are required to be able to meet the expectations of all students to be successful in that class. And so starting this process early is also really helpful, because if there are any especially unusual requests or things that might be something that requires more time to be able to coordinate with the faculty member, it's helpful for us to be able to have the time to do that, to also help the student with, maybe this is an elective course, and perhaps looking at your strengths and the information that we know about you, it may be better for you to take a different class. And let's think about how we might be able to make some adjustments to your courses so you're set up for success. That might be some informal type of advising that we're able to help the student with, and even connect with academic advising and help support any types of needs there. So the more information that we have, the better. And the more time that we have, the better it is for everybody. I hope that's a helpful example. Um, I mentioned a few times today that we work with a number of different campus resources. We connect often with so many of our campus partners, and our office is really just one piece of a vast support network that's available here at Tulane. So our office, in K through 12, oftentimes students may have a resource teacher, a special education teacher, a case manager, somebody who is connecting with all of these different people to help make sure that the student gets everything that they need to be successful. And a lot of this is going to be the responsibility of the student to be able to initiate contact and get connected with these different supports that are available, because they're not all in one place. But there's a lot that's here. So we can help students with identifying different resources that we feel would be really advantageous for them to take advantage of. Success coaching is a great office that helps students, with all kinds of things outside of specific academic areas. So things like study skills, test taking strategies, time management, reading strategies, even talking about the public speaking and practicing a presentation. These are coaches that are professionals on campus, and other universities that I've worked in. This type of support has often been led by peers, other students. Here at Tulane, they're led by certified coaches and professional staff. So it's a pretty robust and intensive type of support that many of our students should take advantage of, and we'd really encourage them to take advantage of everything here at Tulane. It's free. I mean, you're already paying a lot of tuition, so take advantage of it and encourage your students to do that. Academic Learning and Tutoring Center, a lot of really great tutoring support in a number of different academic areas, some led by peers. The Writing Center, there's math support, there's language support, a lot of really great resources for students, and a lot of availability, including virtual and in-person opportunities. So really easy to connect. Academic advising. Tulane has a lot of support built in for NTC students, and also once a student declares a major in specific programs or colleges as well. So really great academic advisors that we connect with, and the students should connect with regularly throughout their time here to think about how their courses might be balanced to be able to meet degree requirements and also with disability related needs to consider. So kind of making sure that the student is able to connect with all of these different supports and advocate for their needs and know what to share. And if they do need help with that, we're here to help. We could either speak with the student, speak on behalf of the student, but a lot of this has to be initiated by the student. So making sure that the student knows to connect with us about anything that they might need help with is really, really important. Campus health, counseling and psychological or psychiatric services, is a great resource that's available. That is, a great mental health resource, as well as so many other resources that are available here on campus. And so we are a great resource for a student as a first stop to get more information, because we don't want them to feel overwhelmed by all of the things that they might need to do or who they might need to connect with and how to do that. We can certainly help with navigating to all of these other resources on campus too and work closely with these campus partners. I think that is everything that I wanted to share. So our location and contact information is really important. We are located in the basement of the Howard Tilton Memorial Library on the Uptown campus. And our testing center is also located here in this same location. You can find out more information about our services and supports by going to accessibility.tulane.edu. You can always reach out to us at goldman@tulane.edu or give us a call, 504-862-8433. But we look forward to working with your student.
Okay, so now it's time for questions. So the first one is if a student has a food allergy, should they complete the Goldman online application for allergen-free dining options, or is the online application only for academic accommodations?
Yeah, that's great. Great question. We do have dining support that's available. Well, first, I'll back up and say we would always encourage a student with any disability related need to get connected with us. We might not be able to address everything or be everything that the student needs, but having us as a resource and building that support is something that's just going to be helpful for them, even for addressing needs that might arise later on so that they don't have to work through the process later. So it would encourage anybody that feels like their student might be able to benefit from just having a connection to a disability resource office. I think that could only be a benefit. That said, dining is actually responsible. Tulane Hospitality and our dining services is responsible for overseeing any requests when it comes to meal plan adjustments. So meal plan exemptions or reductions would be something that is actually not overseen directly by our office. It's overseen by our dining team in Tulane Hospitality. There is a petition or request process for that that goes through them, and I'm happy to drop that link in the chat in a moment here, or Penny can share it later. But we would also encourage that student to just connect with a Tulane dietitian as a first step to get more information about the food options that are available here at Tulane, because the dining facility is actually nut free. So they do a really good job of managing a lot of the major allergens, the most common allergens, I guess the top 8 or top 10 allergens, through first not having any nut products served at the main dining hall at all. And I don't know the specifics about your students' needs, but if there are other needs that need to be considered as well, there are also options at the main dining hall, the commons, that adhere to not having any products that are a part of the top allergens. They prepare foods in very specific ways and only have certain foods that are served at these stations that are available in the commons. And learning more about those options that are available and whether or not that's going to be able to meet your students' needs is probably a good first step. Just what is available in the dining hall and how can they support or not support, and asking those questions. And so I will share some information. Penny, is it okay if I drop that information in the chat?
Yes. I'll also make sure that it goes in the email to all the people who registered in advance. And we'll add it to the slides before we post it. on the website. Um,
Great.
I'll also mention that dining is there, though there will be a family webinar on the dining services next month. So that's a good one to register for or watch, the video in the archive after after that date passes so that you can learn more about what they do offer. There's also a lot of information online, and it's just dining.tulane.edu. If you'll review the website, you'll find a lot of good information. So let's go on to the next question. Is the on-campus health center able to handle medication needs for learning attention needs?
I'm guessing it might be stimulant medication, ADHD medication. Those are controlled medications, so they might have more limitations around those prescriptions. But that would be a question that should be directed directly to Campus Health.
And that email address is campushealth@tulane.edu. There's also good information on their website as well about prescriptions and a list of local pharmacies and some guidance about what to do if your student has those kind of medication needs. Let's see. Another question is where this where the student will have think where will the student have submitted supporting documentation for academic accommodations for the access interview? Is the student expected to provide justification to the DRP for the requested accommodations?
Justification. I mean, I think that there'll be some questions as a part of the interactive process. We'll talk about any
Mhm.
challenges or what the impacts are in different settings, and I think that's the information that we'd really be looking for from the student. What's this look like for you? What's your experience like? Why are you requesting this? So any information the student's able to share is really helpful, but we do always review all of the documentation that's shared, and if that connection is very clearly made in that documentation, then there's probably less of a need for additional clarification from asking the student a lot of questions. So maybe dependent on just the information that's shared first to help us with steering the conversation and figuring out what additional information might be needed. I did also want to mention that Tulane is unique in that there is a pharmacy that's located on our uptown campus, and so even if the prescription itself can't be given by campus health physicians or psychiatrists, the student could transfer a prescription over from an existing provider to the pharmacy that's here, so that might allow for an ease of pickup and access to necessary medication, if that's helpful.
Okay, another question is if a student is having their psychoeducational evaluation updated by their psychologist, is that documentation generally sufficient?
Yeah, I would say that psychological or psychoeducational evaluations are usually very comprehensive. And so, in order to support academic accommodations, oftentimes those types of evaluations or reports are very comprehensive in terms of learning profiles and cognitive strengths and weaknesses that help with the student, us understanding what academic adjustments or modifications or accommodations might be helpful. They may not always provide in-depth information for housing or dining or other needs that might be more related to things outside of the needs that can be addressed in a psychological evaluation. So it depends on what the request is, but the psychological evaluations, especially something that's being updated to reflect current functioning, is excellent, and that's great. And thanks for providing that or working on that and getting that to us. I know that can be a time intensive and sometimes expensive process.
The next question is, can a student do a desk review for the three primary accommodations that he wants? And then when he has more time later in the summer, can he request additional accommodations beyond the three desk review accommodations?
Yeah, absolutely. A student can request accommodations anytime. There's never a deadline. It just might be better for a student to connect with us as early or as they can about needs. But if they don't make the explicit request or share that information, at that time, students can always connect anytime. We do the best we can, at any time when that need is presented to us. We are not doing as many desk reviews though as we have in the past, especially right now because we have time to meet with students. We have found that in the past, students that have gone through our desk review process are less familiar with how to use our testing center or how to advocate, or articulate their needs or talk with their professors about their accommodations, especially as incoming students who've never used accommodations in higher education before. So we found that it's really better for them to make a connection if they're able to with our office, and we have tried to encourage students to actually have an appointment with us, to meet with somebody in our office, because we think that that's just better for the student, so that they have that connection and that they're in a better place with understanding about how their accommodations work at Tulane and what their responsibilities are. The desk review is something we're not doing as much now.
So I'll make a last call for any final questions. If you'll submit them now so that we can make sure we can have Jessica look at those and answer. So looks like we've answered all the questions that have been submitted. So we thank you for those. Well, let's see, there might be one more. Do you have something called early registration as an accommodation? And what are the typical reasons a student might receive this? And so I'm
Yeah,
wondering if
that's
you
a
mean
great question.
registration for courses. So,
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we call that priority registration. So students that have priority to be able to register before the general student population or their typical registration time. And we have many, many, many students who are registered with our office, thousands, as I've mentioned, which is great that there's such a large population of students with disabilities that attend Tulane. And in order for this to actually be a priority, that students that need it are given that priority. We do have to exercise, some judgment when it comes to whether or not a student might need it for access needs. And so typically this is going to mean that a student is not otherwise going to be able to attend class or make it to class because of a disability related need or connection to disability. So it's if there's a very specific type of schedule that's needed in order to make sure that the student is able to attend classes, but um, that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do that because of a direct connection to disability. An example of that, and we're not prescriptive. We're not like, if you have this or this diagnosis, you get this. It's not like that. It really is dependent on what a student might share with us. But I know recently I've approved an accommodation for a student who had cancer. It's very unfortunate that this diagnosis has impacted the student. The student is still wanting to attend Tulane, live on campus, and and engage in everything that Tulane has to offer and give it their best shot. And they are also needing to attend chemotherapy treatments on a very regular basis. That's very regularly scheduled, and needs to adjust their class schedule to be able to manage their treatment needs as well. And so working around that, and allowing for the student to be able to manage their class schedule to the best of their ability is something that we approved the priority registration for. I hope that helps.
next question is, do you submit one online application for each disability or just one application that can be used for multiple disabilities?
Oh, one application is all they need, and then once they're registered with us, and they can submit all of the documentation that they'd like to. And once they're registered with us, and if something else comes up or there's additional information they'd like to share or just an additional accommodation, a student can always share additional information. They don't have to complete another application. In order to make an additional accommodation request with our office, we do have a way for students to do that through their portal. Students sometimes just have a meeting with their DRP and then just like verbally say, hey, I was also thinking about this, or and might make a request in some way outside of their portal. But basically that portal would be what they use to submit an online application, and then once a student has worked through that process, they have access to that portal for the rest of the time that they're here at Tulane, and could submit additional information or documentation directly through that system that we have.
Okay, we have two questions. So these will be the last two questions since we're going a little bit over time here. For the desk review, if a student is busy or working, can they do that to begin with and then meet with your office later in the summer to discuss accommodations and then add additional ones if needed?
I think we already answered that question, but I think if there's a concern about timing of like wanting to get something in quickly, I would just put that on the application. So have the student actually, say, I really have very limited time and can only talk about these accommodations right now, and I need to have a very short meeting, and the DRP will then know to make sure that they're addressing just that. And if it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever we can do, we can work with, whatever we can work with. So trying to let us know what you need to so that we can match that is something that we're happy to do.
Can students request a DRP if there's one that they work well with?
So the assignments are made based off of, sometimes it's based off of a balance of numbers. So making sure that our DRPs are able to, able to meet and be responsive to all of our students. So sometimes a specific staff member might not have the capacity to add in an additional student, or a specific staff member might be better suited for a specific disability related need or request. For example, our assistive technology specialist is often meeting with students who might have a sensory related disability or mobility impact. So students who might be have a hearing loss or vision loss, because they might often work with assistive technology. So he is somebody that's going to most likely be connected with those students. And so there are some specific reasons why we might make it a specific assignment for a student that is not necessarily something that can be controlled or dictated in a different way, because it's just kind of how our operations might work. But if you do have something that you want to make sure that the DRP keeps in mind, or you do really want to work with somebody in particular, we'll try our best to share that. If you want to put that in the application or just shoot us an email, we'll try to make sure that we're considering all of that when we're making the assignments.
Okay. Well, we'll have to close at this point, but Jessica, thank you so much for providing all of this good information. And thank you to the family members who joined us this evening. We hope this has been helpful. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this information will be posted in our archive at families.tulane.edu under the communications tab. Just look there for the webinar archive. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.